that would work, which then will do so.
So good morning. On February 3rd, 1996, 31-year-old Terrence Paquette was discovered murdered in the bathroom of a convenience store on Claricona-Coe Road. He had been stabbed 73 times and his throat was slit. The cash deposit was also missing from the store. So as you can imagine, it was a very gruesome scene, and homicide detectives discovered blood of also an unknown person all over the store. They worked this case very hard, but in 1996, the only way to make an arrest based on blood evidence was to compare that to another blood sample. So the case went cold, and in 2003 it was reopened, and the DNA profile from the blood collected in this case was entered into the DNA database known as CODIS, and no matches were ever found in CODIS. So this case illustrates perfectly why we created a cold case homicide unit in 2019. Now we have 3 detectives and a supervisor who investigate these cases, cold case homicides, full time. Since the cold case unit was created, they have solved 8 murders dating back to 1984. So in 2021, our detectives and members of the state attorney's office enlisted the help of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement forensic genetic genealogy specialist in this case. And I want to thank our partners at FDLE who are here with us. We have Debbie Abney and Anthony Gorgone from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement with us here today. And this case would not be possible without their help. So this is the first Orange County Sheriff's Office case that was solved through genetic genealogy. And on Tuesday, with the assistance of our good friends at the Lake County Sheriff's Office, our detectives were able to arrest Kenneth Robert Stow Jr. For first-degree murder with a weapon. And so I think it's important to remind our public again, remind our survivors and the families of all of our victims out there that we never, ever forget about these cases. We continue to work these cases, and we have some of the most talented and dedicated homicide detectives and forensics specialists here at the Sheriff's Office. And all they need is just a little bit of information and a little bit of help, and we can solve cases from years ago. And just because we don't make an arrest in a case from in a day or in a few weeks or even a few months doesn't mean we give up on our victims and their families. So this time we're going to play a short video that kind of encapsulates the whole case.
It was a horrific crime scene with blood everywhere. On the morning of February 3rd, 1996, deputies discovered the body of Terry Paquette in the bathroom of the Little Champ convenience store in northwest Orange County. Paquette, who was the store manager, was stabbed more than 70 times.
Yeah, he was stabbed 73 times, more to the torso, and his throat was actually slit. It was a very gruesome, violent scene.
The case remained unsolved for nearly 25 years. This month, the Orange County Sheriff's Office arrested Kenneth Stow in connection with the murder. Stow was linked to the murder using genetic genealogy, which uses DNA testing and traditional genealogical methods to identify individuals. This is the first time a homicide case has been solved using genetic genealogy at the Orange County Sheriff's Office. In 2019, homicide detective Brian Savelli began re-examining the case.
And I was just thinking, if somebody was stabbed 73 times, there has got to be additional DNA that was not the victims and potentially the suspects.
During the initial investigation in 1996, detectives found droplets of blood in areas of the convenience store, which today is a quick stop.
And so just with the advancements in DNA and where we are in 2019 at the time when I opened the case, I figured there's got to be something we can do.
Using a DNA sample from a blood stain on a freezer handle, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement determined that the blood came from one of 3 brothers.
And once we were able to identify potential persons of interest, we then looked into their life and seen where they were in '96.
Savelli focused on Kenneth Stow, who had previously worked at the convenience store and lived at an apartment across the street from Terry in 1996.
And he also, still resided in Central Florida, and so that's where we chose to start.
But in order to link Stow to the crime scene, investigators needed a sample of his DNA. A GPS tracker led Savelli to a gas station in Lake County, where he watched Stow throw away several beer cans. Those discarded beer cans were later swabbed for DNA.
The DNA on the item that he had matched the DNA to the crime scene.
Stow was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. All of Terry's family has since passed away, but several of his friends were notified that an arrest was made in his case.
Although people may think that they're forgotten about, they're really not. Just because there's not an arrest made in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that the case is still open, and we are doing everything we can to get every cold case out there solved.
So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Detective Brian Savelli, who worked on the case.
Thank you, Sheriff. As the Sheriff said, on February 3rd, Terry was brutally murdered, and just through the advancement of DNA, we reopened the case in 2019, and we were able to get to the bottom of it and figure out whose blood was left behind. There was blood in several places, and in one sample, there was a mixture between the two. So we're pretty confident, and we're ecstatic that we were able to make an arrest. And of course, it wouldn't be for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and even the state attorneys here that assisted with this. So if you guys have any questions. Lake County, he worked at Romac Lumber in Mount Dora. That's what it appears. He's had some arrests, but they've been minor, a DUI, and I think a disorderly intoxication.
So recently, someone had a similar case, Thomas Garner. It was a Navy murder from 1984. Kind of a similar thing. They tracked his trash once they got a genealogy hit. A cigarette butt in the trash, and dental floss. I mean, it's really a case where somebody scratched somebody else's treasure, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And how important is it that you follow up those leads, and how important the waste stream? Nobody thinks about what they're discarding in a dumpster. They're going to trace back to something so serious.
Well, I think in today's day and age, it's just impossible to never discard any DNA, right? You have to use some form of trash. Nobody's collecting trash or burning in their backyard hardly. But, I just think in 2021, and it doesn't have to be a lot of DNA. It could be something so small that you don't even think about. So.
You've been in law enforcement. Do you ever think that would be such an important part of solving such a serious case?
No. Stating here now, I would never think that. Yeah.
Is this a message to criminals that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try and cover your tracks, you'll leave something behind that investigator?
Yeah, it's not only a message to criminals, but of course, standing behind me, you see none of the victims' families here. So I think it's also a message to victims across the states and even here in Orange County that just because your case isn't solved, that we're doing everything we can. So, it's not only a message to criminals, but also to victims. Oh yeah, there are some friends that still remember this day, and we were able to make contact with them, and they're ecstatic.
How astonished were they to get that phone call?
Yeah, so of course over the time we reapproached them and spoke to them. It's just like going back in time into a time capsule. Where was everybody here in '96? Who were your circle of friends? And they could change over the course of time. So just going back was kind of crazy to them to relive that time.
Can you share with us a little bit of what their reaction was?
Yeah, of course, emotional, excited, anything,
What was the reaction when Saul was caught? And did he say anything?
Yeah, he did. We spoke to him quite extensively, and I'll just give you a glimpse into, he said he worked at that convenience store at one time, but did not confess to the crime. We're still working on a motive at this point.
Well, $1,000 is missing, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so you could speculate that it's robbery, but we're still working on that at this time.
Do you know at what point in time the finder, did he quit, and how long was he not working?
Yeah, we just learned that 2 days ago, so we're trying to work out that timeline.
As far as the science goes in this case, making that first connection between the blood sample that you had from the freezer door to the family members, either him or one of his siblings, how was that connection?
I'm Debbie Abney with FDLE. I oversee the genetic genealogy group. We take this sample from the lab and we turn it into, or we have a vendor turn it into a data file that can be uploaded to 2 public genetic genealogy websites, Family Tree and GEDmatch.com. And those are the only 2 that law enforcement are allowed to research. So we uploaded it to those 2 websites. The access that we have are matches that opted in for law enforcement matching. So these people these distant relatives actively want to help law enforcement. And then we build their family trees and we make the connection, where do these family trees tie together? And they tied together. There were matches on the mother's side and matches on the father's side. And that's why the 3 brothers were the lead.
So that is, again, so I'm clear, that was blood in the convenience store that did not belong to your victim, that you put in these genealogy sites, and that's how you were able to build a family tree backwards.
Correct.
What do we know about the relationship between the victim and the suspect?
The only ties we know now is that the victim would frequent that convenience store to play lotto, potentially grab a cup of coffee, and he worked there at one time, although we don't believe that he worked there at the same time that the victim did. So he's from the area. You're correct. The suspect worked at the same convenience store at some time in the early 90s, and we knew he frequented that store from what he told us. A cup of coffee, scratch-offs, lotto ticket, things of that nature.
You say, obviously, that he did not confess to this. Did he make any kind of a denial? Did he make any kind of claim of innocence as you took him into custody?
He had a hard time explaining the physical evidence.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.